In order to answer number 1 on page 152, you have to remember your order of operations. So if you're thinking, what is order of operations? Just take a minute and think about the words. So order, if I asked you to put something in order, let's say put it in order. Let's say I asked you guys to put yourselves in order based on your age. You would probably say, well, you want youngest to oldest or oldest to youngest. So you have a sense of what that word means. In operations, you should know that when we're talking about math, the operations are the things that you're using to solve the problems: addition, multiplication, subtraction. So, order of operations is simply what order you do these things in when you have multiple operations in one expression. So this expression here, we can see we've got addition, 53 plus 1. We can see we've got subtraction, 8 minus 5. We've got these parentheses, so those must tell us something, right? 8 minus 5 is in parentheses. We've got an exponent. Oh, we've got a small 3 here, so we've got an exponent. And then the last thing we have, two more things actually. We've got division, represented by the fraction. Remember, every time you have a fraction, think of it as division. And then we have multiplication, which is represented by the point or the little dot right there. You won't always see an X for multiplication. In fact, usually you won't, because when we deal with variables, you can use the variable X and it'll get confusing if you also use X to represent the operation multiplication. So anyway, you're probably looking at this going, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. Where do I even begin? Well, that's where the order of operations helps. So there's a little trick we're going to use an acronym to help us remember the order of operations, the proper order to do these in. And the acronym is just a bunch of letters that we're going to turn into a word that's going to remind us of the order. And that word is PEMDAS. So if you ever hear me say use PEMDAS, that's what I'm referring to. And each of the letters in PEMDAS has a meaning. So the P in PEMDAS stands for parentheses, and that lets us know that the very first thing we should do whenever we have an expression with multiple operations, more than one operation, is to do what's in the parentheses first. So when I'm looking at this, I'm immediately going to say, well, what's in parentheses? 8 minus 5. So the first thing I'm going to do is 8 minus 5, and then I can rewrite my equation using that new value that I got. So I would say, well, it's still going to be 4 times. I'm still going to have 53 plus 1 on top here. I'm still going to have something cubed, but instead of 8 minus 5, I can just solve. So 8 minus 5 is 5, 6, 7, 8, 3. So now instead of 8 minus 5 cubed, I have 3 cubed. So now I can continue solving from there. I've done what's in parentheses. The next thing I'm going to do is the E, and the E stands for exponents. So I'm going to look back at my equation and say, okay, I've done the parentheses. Now I do what's in exponents. Oh, well, I can see right here that I have 3 to the third power. And I know, because of lesson 15, that means I multiply 3 times because it's to the third power. So 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27. So now I can rewrite this again, I'm running out of space here, as 4 times 53 plus 1 over 27. So I'm just going piece by piece. I've done the parentheses, I've done the exponents. Now I get to the M and the D, and this is this is important. The M and the D, you can think of them as a group. You actually typically would go left to right, just like you would read a sentence. So whatever one comes first, that's what you would do first. And the same thing goes for the addition and the subtraction. If you're having trouble with PEMDAS, this is often something that you just need a lot of practice in. I have put together some PEMDAS worksheets available for you to practice on Google Classroom. They're not for a grade, so if you get them wrong, it's not going to count against you, but it will help you if you're struggling to figure out how to use PEMDAS. Number 3 on page 152 asks us to write an expression that is equal to 3 to the 4th power times 3 to the 2nd power. And they don't just ask us to write one equivalent expression. They ask for two, one using exponents and one without exponents. So the one without exponents is pretty simple because all you have to do is remember that exponents are used to represent repeated multiplication. So 3 to the fourth is simply 3 multiplied 4 times. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. And 3 to the second is 3 multiplied twice, or 3 times 3. So if you simply rewrite them as repeated multiplication expressions, you have an equivalent expression using no exponents. So that part was pretty simple. But then they ask for a new expression using exponents. So now you have to come up with a new expression with an exponent. And you can think of it one of two ways. You can either look at the first expression with 3 to the fourth times 3 to the second, and you can say, well, they both have a base of 3. So we can actually do this really cool trick where we can just add them and say, well, 4 plus 2 equals 3 to the 6. And if you're wondering how that works, you could look at it the second way, which is that if we are multiplying 3 4 times, and then we're multiplying 3 2 more times, we're really just continuing to multiply 3, right? So if we're repeatedly multiplying a number, we can use that number as our base. So the number we're repeatedly multiplying is 3. And the number of times we're multiplying it is going to be our final exponent. So I'm multiplying it a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So that's another way that you could come up with 3 to the 6th power. So you could first write it as repeated multiplication and then figure it out by adding them up. Or you could simply say, well, if they have the same base, which these ones do, I know right away all I have to do is add the exponents to figure out my new power.